in the last chapter was a tearful one. David and Jonathan weeping as David learns that King Saul really does want him dead, and he'll have to live his life on the run. David will have to move from place to place, knowing that, as he said in chapter 20, verse 3, there is hardly a step between me and death. So let's see where he runs to. I'm in chapter 21, verse 1, reading from the New American Standard Version. Then David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. And Ahimelech came trembling to meet David and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" Nob is the city of the priests, and Ahimelech, of course, knows who David is. All of Israel knows David as the mighty warrior who killed Goliath, who was appointed by the king as commander of 1,000 and has amassed great victories. It wasn't a strange thing to see him coming and going out to war, but showing up alone to see the priest? That was strange. Ahimelech isn't sure what to make of it, so he questions him about it. Continuing verse 2, David said to Ahimelech the priest, "The king has commissioned me with a matter and has said to me, 'Let no one know anything about the matter on which I am sending you, and with which I have commissioned you.' And I have directed the young men to a certain place. Now therefore, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever can be found." So this is interesting, right? David is clearly lying, and there's some thought that he's lying to protect the priests. I think, just plain and simple, David is lying to protect himself. He fears for his life. He needs provisions, and he doesn't want word to get back to Saul as to where he is or what he's doing. So if he can make the priest believe that the king sent him, everything will seem to be in order. In this circumstance, David is not clinging to God or trusting God by telling the truth. What if David had said, "Listen, King Saul wants to kill me. I have done nothing wrong. I'm trusting God. I believe he sent me here for provision." He could have gotten the same result, and the priest would have had a heads up when the king summons them in the next chapter. Fear will cause us to take matters into our own hands and try to protect ourselves rather than trusting God's protection, which is always the better and more powerful path. Continuing verse 4, the priest answered David and said, "There is no ordinary bread on hand, but there is consecrated bread, if only the young men have kept themselves from women." David answered the priest and said to him, "Surely women have been kept from us as previously when I set out, and the vessels of the young men were holy, though it was an ordinary journey. How much more then today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him consecrated bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which was removed from before the Lord, in order to put hot bread in its place when it was taken away. Consecrated bread was set apart for the priests. In the next chapter, we learn that Ahimelech actually sought the Lord to learn whether he should give David these provisions. Verse 7, now one of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. Interesting how that verse is slipped in there, foreshadowing what's to come in the next chapter. Continuing verse 8, David said to Ahimelech, "Now, is there not a spear or a sword on hand? For I brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's matter was urgent." Then the priest said, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, behold, it is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you would take it for yourself, take it, for there is no other except it here. And David said, there is none like it. Give it to me. Surely the priest is puzzled. You're a man of war, David. That's what you do. How do you not have any weapons? And you're asking me for a sword or spear? Typically, the priest would be the last people to have weapons. And remember, swords and spears were few and far between, even among the soldiers. But as God would have it, Goliath's sword is being kept there. And if anyone should have that sword, it's David. Verse 10, then David arose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, king of Gath. Well, this is quite curious. Gath is in the territory of the Philistines. So Achish is a Philistine king. They know, as well as Israel, that David is the one who killed their fearsome giant Goliath. And here he comes rolling into town with Goliath's sword. They also know that David has defeated them in other battles. He has to be among their staunchest enemies. Yet this is where he chooses to flee to. We're not told David's thinking in this. Maybe he thought he could seek asylum as a refugee. But whatever the case, this seems to be a dangerous move. Continuing verse 11, but the servants of Achish said to him, is this not David, the king of the land? Interesting, they call him the king of the land. This is one of the reasons why Saul hates him so, because of his prominence. Did they not sing of this one as they danced, saying, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s? David took these words to heart and greatly feared Achish, king of Gath. So he disguised his sanity before them and acted insanely in their hands and scribbled on the doors of the gate and let his saliva run down into his beard. So David realizes maybe this wasn't the right move. He's in danger here as well. You have to wonder if David sought the Lord before his decision to come here. He seems to be winging it. And granted, his whole world has spun out of control. He has to think fast, move fast in order to stay a step ahead of Saul. But you have to wonder, is this the plan that God gave him to seek protection from the enemies of God's people? Now he's got to feign insanity in order to get away from them. David is human. That's what we love about him. Continuing verse 14, then Achish said to his servants, behold, you see the man behaving as a madman. Why do you bring him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this one to act the madman in my presence? Shall this one come into my house? I love that. Do I lack madmen that you have brought this madman into my house? Given everything David has done in his battles against the Philistines, they could have delighted in killing him with Goliath's sword. But God is faithful. David is able to escape this dangerous situation he's gotten himself into. And he saw it as God's deliverance. We know this from Psalm 34, which David wrote concerning this occasion. Another must-read psalm as we study this book of 1 Samuel. It is so good. This is what he says in Psalm 34, 6 and 7. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. David's judgment may have been off in fleeing to the Philistines and in lying to the priests, but thank God that he doesn't abandon us when we make a wrong choice, take a wrong path, when we're lacking in faith. God doesn't say, David, you didn't cling to me that time or the last 5 times, so I'm cutting you off. David's testimony is that when he cried out to God, the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. And we say hallelujah because we serve the same God who sees us making wrong choices, taking wrong paths, lacking in faith, and he never leaves us. He is our deliverer. And we could feast all day on the truth that the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. But this is what I want to end with, still in Psalm 34, verse 8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. How blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. It reminds me so much of God's invitation to cling to him. Taste and see, cling and see that the Lord is good, that he is faithful, loving, kind, that he never leaves. How blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. How blessed is the one who clings to him.